Hey everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, and it's time to talk about what happened at WWE Crown Jewel from Saudi Arabia. Now, it was an eventful show, let's just say that. But first and foremost, I have to give a huge thank you to everybody who donated to mine and Sam's live stream. Of course, all proceeds will be going to Amnesty International. We will release a final figure when we find out what exactly that is, but we can confirm that I believe thousands of dollars have been raised, and that's all going to go to Amnesty International. So thank you so much to everyone who even just watched, but also those who donated as well. It's all for a really good cause, and we're glad that we could do it. Now, without further ado, let's just dig in. Let's just have a look at what happened at Crown Jewel. Was it better than Evolution? Let's find out. So we kick things off with Real American hitting the speakers, and Hulk Hogan makes his first appearance on a WWE show since the whole racism scandal of 2015 as the host of Crown Jewel. And not just that, he gets a microphone and he cuts a promo inside the ring. And the crowd popped for him and everything, but I imagine, I didn't see it at the time, but I imagine the response online was maybe a little bit more mixed. Hogan says that it feels great to be back in front of the WWE Universe, in front of all his Hulkamaniacs, and that the power of Hulkamania is like stronger than ever right here at Crown Jewel. Dude, Jack, brother, and all that stuff that Hogan does. Does a bit of this, does a bit of that. Off he goes. That was it. Bye, Hulk. We wouldn't see him again for the whole rest of the show. I think if WWE absolutely had to get Hogan involved, like if they absolutely had to, then at least, I guess, at the very least, they kept his involvement to a minimum, or as little as they could, while still having him open and host the show. Because he didn't appear at all for the rest of the event, not in a backstage segment, not at ringside, not involved in any of the matches or aftermath or anything. So, at the very least, I guess everyone's discomfort was kept a little bit lower than it already was, just because we didn't see him for the rest of the night. And his promo was kind of just a simple one. We could have probably guessed the majority of what he was going to say, and then he just said it. Hulkamaniacs, I'm back. Dude, Jack, brother, bye. So we opened the show with the first of the World Cup Quarterfinal matches from the SmackDown bracket. Rey Mysterio taking on Randall Keith Orton. Now, this wasn't, my favourite match of the night or anything, but I think it was probably the best choice to open the show. Classic heel, classic babyface, and you could tell that both guys know each other absolutely inside out from all the years they must have spent on the road together during Rey's, previous WWE run. So I get it. I understand why they opened the show with this match. The crowd were really hot for both guys, but particularly, of course, Rey Mysterio. All the kids were going crazy for him. Kids who probably weren't even born during Rey's heyday, even in WWE, his WWE heyday, they were probably still not even born yet. Rey just has such a permanent connection with young fans especially, and can still back it up in the ring. He can still go. So can Randy Orton, of course. At one point, Randy went for the mask. He was really being a dick, really being a heel, and I always prefer seeing Randy as a heel and a babyface. So, again, although it wasn't my favourite match of the night, I still enjoyed it to a degree. Rey actually picked up the clean victory with a roll-up, but then was hit with an RKO immediately after the bell, and Randy Orton beat him up a little bit, and I guess this was going to play into the tournament going ahead. At this point, I thought the two favourites in my mind to win the World Cup were Rey and Rollins over on the Raw side of the bracket. So I thought, ooh, could this be part of a bigger story involving Rey overcoming the odds, having been beaten down after the first match and he eventually wins to a huge pop? Or could it play into the final where he's a little bit weakened compared to the fresher Rollins and then Rollins wins? As it turns out, spoilers, neither man will see. You've probably seen already, but if you haven't, just hold on because it gets crazy. It gets really, really crazy. Next up, Miz versus Jeff Hardy, the second match in the SmackDown side of the draw. It was, again, classic heel versus babyface stuff, but I didn't really enjoy this match as much as the first one. It was still fine. It got a "This is awesome" chant from the crowd, which I found a little bit strange considering that it wasn't even the best match on the show up until this point. I don't know, it was a bit strange. Again, nothing offensive here, it was still fine. Jeff Hardy even busted out his old running along the crowd barrier spot, which fair play to him. If you're going to bring back a move, I guess, for a hot crowd, then fair play, do that. But again, it wasn't the slickest or the smoothest match of the night. I say a hot crowd, but then again, it became obvious as the show wore on that the crowd were getting tired. It was a long show, and while they may have popped big for the old favourites like Rey and Jeff Hardy and all that, it again felt a little bit sort of like the energy was sapped as the evening wore on. Understandably so, I guess. The Miz picked up the clean victory, actually, countering the twist of fate into the skull-crushing finale. Can't remember if it was in this match or the next one, but at one point Miz tried to win with his feet on the ropes and the referee spotted it. So he did try and cheat at some point in the tournament. He wasn't a total babyface, but he won this one clean, which kind of surprised me a little bit. Next up, Seth Rollins versus Bobby Lashley. Lashley was, of course, accompanied by Lio Rush, and I get why they did all the first round tournament matches in a row to get them out of the way early on and give guys time to rest and stuff for the semi-finals. But by this point, I was getting a little bit sick of the World Cup. Don't worry, because as we get later on in the show, you'll realise that the World Cup comes to dominate the headlines for quite a left field reason. I've been hinting at it already in this video, and again, if you haven't seen it, it's crazy. It's so... Let's talk about this match anyway. Rollins versus Lashley. Rollins won clean with the curb stomp, and Lio Rush was, of course, being Bobby Lashley's detestable little manager friend on the outside, and I think he's really, really good in that role. He's a great heel, with the potential, of course, to turn babyface at any point in the future because he's so nimble, so athletic, and can play the underdog due to his size, so fair play. Not really much to talk about in this match, really. It was probably the weakest of the opening 4 World Cup tournament matches, just because of how short it was and how simple it was. But I think it was the right decision to have Rollins win clean and progress to the semi-finals. Next up, the final opening round match, Kurt Angle versus Dolph Ziggler, accompanied, of course, by big Drew McIntyre. And honestly, this was my favourite of the opening round matches. It just goes to show that when he's paired with the right opponent, Kurt Angle can still hold up his end of the bargain and put on a really entertaining match. I was really, really impressed with Kurt here. I thought he did a fantastic job. Now, the thing that I really noticed in this match was just how strong they put over Dolph Ziggler. He kicked out of the Angle Slam. I think he reversed 2 ankle lock attempts. He was really busting out of like all of Kurt's attempted finishes and that sort of thing. It was a really strong performance from Dolph. Drew didn't even get involved to help him win. They might have been like a minor distraction or something, but Drew didn't lay hands on Kurt, and Dolph hit him with the zigzag to pick up the victory. I actually thought Kurt might have been a bit shaken by the impact of the bump he took on the zigzag, but then again, I think it might have just been selling. He had like his eyes were wide open and he looked kind of glassy-eyed, but it might have just been like a good, convincing sell of the move, I guess. But anyway, he seemed fine, I guess, when he headed to the back. Dolph won clean with the zigzag, 1, 2, 3, and progressed to the semi-finals. Next up, the first title match of the night, the SmackDown Tag Team Championship bout between the champions, The Bar, and the challengers, The New Day. The New Day came out riding a magic carpet, and it was a long entrance, man. This entrance took ages. I think a lot of people probably would like this entrance because it's something different and it felt a bit WrestleMania-y and special. I didn't like it because, honestly, the camera angle wasn't that good. We couldn't tell that it was a magic carpet until a little bit later on when it panned around to the side. It just looked like they were on a slightly higher platform, and then it lowered slowly, and then they got on the ramp and did more dancing, and it was just like, come on lads, get to the ring. You know, I love the New Day, but I found this entrance a bit tiresome. The Bar, of course, were accompanied by their new ally, The Big Show, fresh off a recent heel turn. Of course, The Big Show has turned more times than maybe anyone in wrestling history. He's a heel now, that's all you really need to know. And this match was like a couple of the World Cup matches we've already talked about. It was kept pretty short, pretty simple. I wouldn't say it was the best of the New Day or the best of The Bar, but it was still passable. By the way, the 2 New Day members in the ring were Kofi and Big E. Xavier Woods was in his, I guess, more traditional role with the trombone on the outside. This match featured a screwy finish to help the heels win, as Big E sort of was near the corner where the Big Show was lurking on the outside, and the referee was kind of caught underneath a kind of a dog pile almost. He was kind of in the way of the action. So while the referee was a little bit blindsided, Big Show hit Big E with the knockout punch, although it wasn't a full-on knockout punch because Big E fell backwards and then staggered to his feet straight into a bro kick, and the Bar retained the Tag Team Championships, as I think most of us suspected, because it didn't seem like WWE were going to want to do too many big title changes or anything on this show, just so they could avoid referring back to it all the time in video packages and that sort of thing. Next up, we had the World Cup semi-final. On the SmackDown side of things, it was The Miz versus Rey Mysterio, and along with Kurt versus Dolph, I think this was probably my favourite of all the World Cup matches. Why not the final, Jack? Did nothing good happen in the final? We will get to that in just a moment, my friends. Hold on for one more day. But no, the big news out of this match was not only the fact that Miz and Rey looked pretty crisp and sharp against each other and really did well, but also the fact that the Miz beat Rey Mysterio clean. So in one night, he beat 2 big baby faces clean as a whistle, Jeff Hardy and Rey, both with the skull-crushing finale, and looked pretty damn strong heading into the final. At this point, I was certain that Seth Rollins was going to win the World Cup. Absolutely 100% certain. That's not what... Let's get to the next semi-final. On the Raw side of things, the next match was Seth Rollins versus Dolph Ziggler in what I thought would just be another, step on the road to Seth's victory in the main event. Let's take a look at what happened. I think under normal circumstances, this would have been one of the better matches of the World Cup, but I just found it a little bit hard to get excited for it, purely because we've seen Dolph and Seth wrestle each other so many times over the past few months. It's starting to get a little bit tiresome, but they still did really good work, and you've got to respect their effort that they always put into each and every one of their matches, and that's totally fine. This was another screwy finish, as Drew McIntyre shoved Seth Rollins off the top rope when the referee wasn't looking, and then Dolph Ziggler picked up the victory. Yeah, this set up a heel versus heel final between Dolph and The Miz to determine the best in the world. A very curious booking decision in my opinion, especially in a place like Saudi Arabia, where the baby faces were getting much bigger reactions than the heels just by virtue of being classic traditional baby faces and often the more recognisable names. Why would you go for Ziggler versus Miz in the final? All will become clear soon, my friends. Don't you worry about that. I can't wait to talk about it. I just can't. I also want to remind everybody of the stipulation that Shane McMahon put in place on SmackDown, where he's, so passionate about SmackDown that he said, whoever gets to the final of this tournament, if they lose to the Raw guy, they're fired from SmackDown Live. And I thought that was a bit unfair, because why on earth would he fire the guy who did the best out of all of his guys in the tournament? Why would he fire the guy who got to the final, putting in the best effort out of anyone on the blue brand? Didn't really make sense, but I could totally see a confrontation happening between Miz and Shane in the final. So we'll see how that panned out. Next up, the WWE Championship match, which really took a back seat this evening because of, I guess, the last-minute replacement, because Daniel Bryan obviously refused to go to Saudi Arabia, as has been reported online and covered over the past week or two. So Samoa Joe stepped in at the last minute. You've got to kind of applaud him for being a last-minute replacement, I guess, although I also commend Daniel Bryan for standing by his convictions and all that sort of thing. That's totally fair enough. But given, I guess, Joe's weaker political position in the company, as opposed to a mega star like Bryan, you can totally see why he stepped in and did the match. I don't have any problems with that at all. But the match itself, I found hard to get invested in just because of the circumstances surrounding it, mainly because it was very predictable that AJ Styles was going to win. That's exactly what happened. This match was basically a stripped-down version of the previous matches we've seen in Joe and Styles' feud over the past few months. Styles won clean with a phenomenal forearm, and that was it. Not really much to report. It kind of lacked the intensity for me that I would have liked to have seen from a Joe versus Styles match, but then again, the feud has kind of been milked for all it's worth recently, and I think it was probably too soon for the pair to face each other again. I understand why it happened given the circumstances, but I wasn't too big a fan of this match. Next up, the Universal Championship match, or the match for the vacant Universal Championship, pitting Brock Lesnar against Braun Strowman. This, I thought, would be the most eventful thing on the show, and it probably will turn out to be in the long, the grand scheme of things, but just wait for the World Cup final. But no, this match was really interesting and a bit controversial. Actually, I didn't like it. We'll talk about why. So before the match, Baron Corbin came out to, present the Universal Championship, hold it up in the middle of the ring, and then get out of the way. But then before the bell, he turned around and clocked Braun Strowman with the title in the back of the head, immediately putting him at a massive disadvantage. Why? We don't really know yet, but I'm sure we'll, find out a bit more about it on Monday Night Raw. Brock Lesnar then hit Braun Strowman with an F5, and I was like, this can't be happening. 1-2, Strowman kicked out. Another F5, 1-2, Strowman kicked out. A third F5, 1-2, Strowman kicked out. And by this point, I was thinking, yes, this is good. I think if Strowman had come back at this point and really battled and won against all odds and looked like a monster, this would have been my favourite match of the night easily. Would have been easily the match. That's not what happened. Then Lesnar F5 Strowman outside of the ring, another F5, Strowman beat the count back into the ring at 9, and I was getting shades of like WrestleMania 34, Lesnar versus Reigns, where Reigns kicked out loads of finishes, but I thought in the back of my head, I was like, yeah, but Reigns lost that match, didn't he? Lesnar hit another F5 on Strowman and won, and he's the new Universal Champion. What? What's going on? Why have you done this to us again, WWE? After the match, it was announced that it's going to be Lesnar versus Styles, champion versus champion at Survivor Series, but if Styles goes over, if Styles can beat Lesnar at Survivor Series, then all is forgiven. Nearly all is forgiven. But who's going to get that title from Lesnar? Do you remember what happened last time? He held it for ages and he never showed up. I could cry. Things couldn't get worse from this. Oh wait, they did get worse. Let's take a look at what happened next. So we get to the final to determine the winner of the WWE World Cup and the best wrestler, remember that, the best wrestler in the world the best in the world. It's between Dolph Ziggler on the Raw side of things and The Miz on the SmackDown side of things. Drew came out with Dolph, but was immediately sent to the back by the referee, presumably for interfering in the last match with Rollins. Totally get that. That's great. I love that booking. Makes sense. It's got referees stamping their authority. I like that. That's really cool. That's good. Then Miz jumped off before the bell, and I was like, oh, is this going to turn to a heel-off, where both are trying to be really sneaky and bend the rules in any way they can? I was like, that could be pretty good. I'd enjoy that. The fight spilled to the outside. Miz came up, hobbling, holding his knee. I'm 99% sure that it was a fake injury, given the nature of of what happened next. So I should point out that Corbin had stayed ringside for this match because he is, of course, the acting general manager of Monday Night Raw. Shane McMahon, as the commissioner of SmackDown, also made his way down to the ring. They were just kind of hanging out at ringside. But then when Miz was injured, he really wanted to continue, I guess because of the prestige of winning the World Cup, and also because he knew that if he lost the match, he'd be fired. But the referees were like, you can't wrestle. Like, you just can't wrestle. It can't happen. Shane looked really understanding. Miz looked really brave, which is weird for a heel, but Shane looked really understanding. He was like, I get it. He's injured. He can't compete, but he wants to. The announcer started to go, your winner by forfeit, Dolph Ziggler. Shane was like, no, stop it. I have an idea. I want to wrestle. Shane McMahon wanted to get in the ring. Despite not qualifying for the tournament, not winning any prior matches, just shoehorn himself into the final like WrestleMania 9 when Hogan challenged Yokozuna after the main event, making Bret Hart look like a chump. It was so strange, a booking decision. Felt like a rib on us, on smarks like us. Felt like a rib. I'm sure it was. I think that this is deliberately WWE going, everyone shut up. We can do what we want. We can have our son compete in the final of the World Cup. Yeah, of course we can. And you know what? In a strange way, I was entertained by it. As ridiculous and as bad as it was, I was entertained by it. Not saying it was good though. So Shane inserted himself into the match. It was a short match, and I get that Ziggler was, feasibly tired from the previous matches that he competed in the World Cup. But Shane won with the coast to coast, winning the World Cup trophy and becoming the best wrestler in the best in the world. Ross called it months ago. Shane is the best in the world, officially. There was a long celebration. He's high-fiving kids in the front row. He's got the trophy. He's like, yes, I've done it. I'm Shane McMahon. I can only imagine this will play into Survivor Series. I can only imagine, but how? I have no idea. On the stream, one of our donators, and I apologise because I can't remember who it was, but they had a very interesting theory. They thought this might have been a SmackDown conspiracy. Miz faking an injury so that they get a fresh guy in to win the final and then SmackDown win the World Cup. I like that idea, and if they go with it, I think that's cool, but there's no getting away from the fact that Dolph Ziggler lost to Shane McMahon in conclusive and decisive and quick fashion, and I felt really bad for him. So finally we got to the big dream main event, D-Generation X, Triple H and Shawn Michaels against the Brothers of Destruction, The Undertaker and the Mayor of Knox County, Tennessee, Kane. Glenn Jacob Kane. Obviously we had long ass entrances for all the guys involved, and then after all the entrances were complete, we also had a long stare down in the ring before the bell rang. Or after the bell rang even, they still just all kept staring each other down, and I was like, wow, they're really trying to make this long and epic, aren't they? And I obviously respect all four guys. They're four of the biggest legends in wrestling history, and you have to commend them for, giving it their all and really putting in an effort in these sort of matches well beyond their prime. But it was difficult to get invested in just because of how slow it was and how sluggish it was at times, and how clearly guys like Taker and Michaels obviously had a lot of ring rust too. They're just not the same as the greats we once knew them to be. It was all kind of back and forth at first, but then the big thing that changed the momentum was when Triple H was put through the announce table on the outside after it had been stripped down. But not stripped down of the monitors as well, and his back landed right on all the monitors and stuff. It looked really nasty. There's been a few reports actually, I'm not sure how true they are, but Triple H may have picked up an injury because of that spot. We'll obviously clarify that once we know. But if he is injured, obviously we want to wish Triple H a speedy recovery. Michaels was then forced to wrestle the match 2-on-1 for quite a while, and although he's not quite the same Shawn Michaels, he can still emote. He still really puts a lot of emotion and sympathy into his performances, so I get it. He doesn't quite bump the same, but he still acts the same, I suppose, in a way. At one point though, he was sat on the top rope and he was punching away at Kane, just punched his mask off, Kane's mask flew away, and then Kane went for the mask. I was like, why are you going for the mask? You're Kane, we know what you look like. You've been unmasked for ages and you've only just started wearing it again in the past few years. Just leave the mask off, we don't care. We know what you look like. You're the mayor of Knox County, Tennessee. Shawn then got on the top rope and did what can only be described as a very scary and brave moonsault to the outside. I liked his little touch of character there. Before he jumped, he went, oh well, and then did it. But he didn't get caught cleanly by the Brothers of Destruction on the outside. Kind of fell between them and hit the mats on the outside like hard. I think got himself a little cut on his head as well, but he seemed okay. He still continued the rest of the match, so hopefully he's fine. Back in the ring, Triple H recovered and made his way back to the apron slowly. Michaels gave him the hot tag. Triple H hit like the spine buster and the high knee and all that sort of thing on both Brothers of Destruction. But then Undertaker and Kane worked their way back into the match, and it looked like they were maybe about to win when they scooped up both members of DX for stereo tombstones. But then Shawn, who was being held by Taker, reached across to the other tombstone going on and raked at Kane's eyes. This distracted Kane, he dropped Triple H, DX reassumed control, and then they blasted Undertaker, or Michaels blasted Undertaker, with a sweet chin music. Then Wanda Kane into the pedigree, and D-Generation X have won. Quite how this leads into the rumoured Michaels versus Taker match, I'm not certain. Maybe they've scrapped it, maybe it's just going to continue rolling on Monday Night Raw. We'll find out loads more as the days go by, but yeah, this was a long and quite difficult match to enjoy to close the show. I guess it felt pretty epic, but at the same time, it wasn't by any stretch of the imagination the most noteworthy thing on the show. We had Hogan back, we had Shane McMahon proving that he's the best in the world, and Brock Lesnar's the Universal Champion again. Wow, I need a drink. So that's it for WWE Crown Jewel. Thank you, a massive thank you once again to everyone who donated on our live stream. Of course, all proceeds will go to Amnesty International. And once we've got a final figure, we'll make that public so everyone knows how much. But well done, everyone. And just everyone who joined in and watched as well. Thank you so much for helping us get through a memorable and occasionally challenging show. I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com. Thank you very much for watching this video. You can follow me on Twitter if you want at Jack the Jobber. You can follow all of us at Cultaholic. Check out our Patreon too if you wish, patreon.com/Cultaholic. And never forget, of course, absolutely, to smash that subscribe button and to join us.